In being able to access past lives, we are able to treat illnesses that may have started back thousands, even trillions of years. And thankfully, we are, all of us, working at breakneck speeds and in unison towards capturing the mind's fatal flaws and correcting it back to its inherent state of perfect.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Historica Esoterica. I'm your friend Roswell, and I'm joined by my friend,
the Master K Ultra.
Oh, come on. Not one of your better ones, I'm not going to lie.
Anytime you lead an episode, I've decided this is what I'm doing.
Great. This is what I get for my little end quotes anytime. It's a push-pull. We have a real dichotomy.
Yeah, exactly.
But today we're coming together to discuss a 2012 film called The Master, written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, and starring everybody's favorite Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Or as you called him off mic, Big Jesse Plemons, which is my favorite name for him now.
I couldn't remember. They look very similar, which is why I guess they were playing father and son in this one. But yeah, so powerhouse actors, I gotta say, and a powerhouse director.
Even
There Will Be Blood fame.
Yeah, even like the smaller actors. I haven't seen this movie in a while. I forgot how many big names there were. Like even
Laura Dern.
Yeah, Laura Dern just showing up to deliver 4 lines.
Yeah.
Like,
and she's great.
Yeah, she's
great. I love Lauren, dude.
Rami Malek, Amy Adams being a powerhouse as always.
She's great. Yeah. But also after her role in this film, I was like, Amy, are you all right? That's a rough role.
Yeah.
But noticeably, though, not in this film, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Reasons we may discuss later. But I guess before we go through the beats of the plot and maybe pick it apart a little bit more, I might ask you, how would you pitch this film to, I don't know, a podcast co-host you're going to force to watch it?
I don't remember what my pitch was. I think I just said it's about Scientology.
That is exactly what you said.
Yeah. And I stand by it. No, Paul Thomas Anderson, as a filmmaker, is someone I really go back and forth on.
Yeah.
Because Boogie Nights and Licorice Pizza both just creep me out so much. But
okay, I haven't seen that. Was Licorice Pizza the one where he's dating an older woman or something?
Yeah, that's the one where Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, actually. High school student.
Tiny
Tiny
Jesse Plemons.
Yeah, Jesse Plemons looks way more like Philip Seymour Hoffman than his son does. Just side note. And Boogie Nights is the movie all about porn. So naturally, right. I watched it and went, ew, gross.
Yeah.
But
that's kind of how I felt about some of this movie.
Yeah, admittedly, I did forget about that. Maybe I was just super young when I watched Boogie Nights the first time, because I was watching this oh, Roswell, I'm sorry. I keep doing this to you.
It's all right. Yeah, just one more, notch in my belt of times Matt has made me watch sex pervert films. Disgusting sex pervert films. Which is only 2, to be fair.
I really need to start watching the movies before I recommend that we talk about them on the podcast, instead of operating off of a 4-year memory. Well, I remember that being good.
Like you said before, we're gonna suspend your choosing rights in the movies we watch. And I will be choosing from now on. But no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so basically it's about the relationship between Joaquin Phoenix's character and Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. The latter of which is sort of an L. Ron Hubbard inspired cult leader, very charismatic, if full of hot air. Yeah, it's great. It's got Joaquin Phoenix doing what he does best, which is being scary and unsettling, and
Yeah.
Philip Seymour Hoffman doing what he does best, which is being incredibly likable.
Sorry, before I forget, just a
Yeah.
quick note before we get into the plot. Hey, did you read about this movie's struggles to get funded initially?
I actually did not look into that. No.
Yeah, so Paul Thomas Anderson was shopping this script around for a while, and no one wanted to fund it until, hang on, let me look up her name. Was it Mary Ellison, the daughter of Larry Ellison, who's the tech billionaire who like made Oracle after making a database for the CIA, which is where he got that name and idea from. Just side note. Yeah, she decided to fund it just like completely. And then Harvey Weinstein proceeded to buy the distribution rights to it. So
weird.
Unfortunate and very sus people just sort of tied up in this one from the beginning.
Yeah.
But no Scientologists for whatever reason.
Well, and I think we'll find out the reason later on when I go through my comprehensive list of Scientologists.
Yeah. Also, just quick side note about Larry Ellison. On a whim, I looked him up and then just typed in Epstein afterwards to see if I could get any hits. In 2008, Oracle hired a new CFO named Jeff Epstein, who I checked is just a different guy named Jeffrey Epstein.
That's rough.
And I really hope he changed his name because he seems to just be a CFO.
Yeah.
So
I hope he changed it to like Joff with a G or something. Just to, so he still gets to be himself. That is a weird, I don't know, what would you call that? Like a parallelism?
Yeah. Yeah, it was very weird. I couldn't the weirdest thing was while I was trying to figure out if it was the same Jeff Epstein, I was just like looking up different timelines. And in the year that the other Jeff Epstein was hired as CFO, our Jeff Epstein, the one that we talk about, there was just like nothing listed on any like timelines about what he was doing. So I was going insane. So it's possible that I just fell for an incredibly lazily put together CIA trick there. But I think they were separate people. I didn't look too much into it. But I just wanted to put that one out there. Larry Ellison is sus either way, though. So
right.
I don't trust Oracle.
Well, I also think it's sort of hard to find a Hollywood film that isn't going to be backed by sus people at this point.
Yeah.
Because, Weinstein bought the rights, and obviously in 2022 that means something different than it did in 2012.
Yeah, that's the other reason I didn't do much digging. I was like, well, we've already got one,
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, I'm not too familiar with Paul Thomas Anderson. I've only seen 2 of his other films, which I like well enough. I don't know anything about the guy, and whether or not he's, as your crew would say, sus. But yeah, nothing that I briefly researched about this was weird to me, except, I mean, I guess we can talk about this before we actually jump into the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
How they were very, very careful in dodging saying it was about Scientology in pretty much every interview, both Paul Thomas Anderson, Harvey Weinstein, anyone involved with the movie. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I think my favorite was, this one might have even just like been on the Wikipedia. I was looking up interviews to see if I could get anybody who copped to it actually being about Scientology, and no one did. But there was one, like, someone involved with the production, I think, was like, this is just a movie about a man after World War II. And she like basically just says, like, we didn't say there was Scientology in this movie. Why would you think there was? I'm just imagining like Arthur Miller going, what, you think The Crucible is about McCarthyism?
Yeah.
It's based during the Salem witch trials, you idiot. How could it be about something else?
That's pretty funny. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and my thought on that, which I guess is maybe my skeptical thought on that, is like, listen, you've got people like Tom Cruise who are friendly with Paul Thomas Anderson. He was in one of his movies, and the Wikipedia mentions that like there was maybe a little bit of strain over that. So like, I think they're just trying not to kick a hornet's nest.
Yeah.
Scientology, again, I don't know too much about it. I know you're going to be elucidating us a little bit later, but they seem pretty aggressive in their dealings with critics. If that maybe is a nice way of putting it.
You mean suppressive individuals?
Is that what they call them?
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, R245, folks. You'll know what that means soon.
Curious.
It's even worse than whatever you're thinking.
Huh.
Yeah, so that's absolutely why they were doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's just sort of like understandable, because it's like, well, you just don't want to cause too much controversy. You just want people to see the film and make money.
Yeah.
You don't want to potentially annoy a faith group, especially one that has so many big names in the industry you work in.
Mhm.
But there was some, I don't know if I would call it backlash, but maybe some negative responses to this from the Scientology community. Were you going to talk about that, or should we just skim over that now?
Yeah, we can go over it now. So I honestly, really, my discussion of like the evil, crazy things that Scientologists did are during the Cold War, because never let it be said that I am comfortable straying away from my only area of interest here.
Understandable. Yeah, so basically, I'm just going to read this from the Wikipedia. Who cares?
This is the movie episode, everybody. We're allowed to be relaxed.
Yeah, it's been, I hope you had a nice winter break, if you get one,
But we didn't.
We did not. So basically, according to the Wikipedia, Anderson screened the movie for Tom Cruise, who was not too happy with some parts of it, which I'm like, that seems fair. I don't know what that means. Like, was he just like a little offended, or was he, I don't know. But then it goes on to say that the officials of the Church of Scientology hit the roof, quote unquote, when they heard about it from Cruise. Especially the scene where it's suggested that the belief system is just a product of Philip Seymour Hoffman's character's imagination, which is just like, So that, I think that's pretty much all of the response, but it's just like,
it didn't, like, no one immediately died as a result of the movie being made, with with one maybe notable exception. But Paul Thomas Anderson's still out there. He's kicking.
Right.
He's made a movie about how pedophilia is cool when hot girls are the ones doing it. So
he heeds the warning.
Yeah, he's blending into the Hollywood crowd now. But I
hope you didn't hear my chair just break.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sorry about that. That was a scary sound.
Yeah, I saw you like whip around. I was hoping you were all right.
I'm okay.
We're here to separate your phaeton from your body.
Well, I think we all need some processing. And to do that, let's jump into the film.
Ooh.
Was that a good segue?
I liked it.
I'm a genius, to quote you. Okay, so basically we start with this alcoholic World War II veteran named Freddie Quayle, played by Joaquin Phoenix, who's very clearly got PTSD after the war, and is already maybe kind of a unstable type of guy. I think the first scene we get is him like joking around with some of the other war guys in a little bit of a blue manner.
Yeah, it's in several blue manners. We also get him like hacking a coconut open with a machete. So
see, that's the first thing you see, and I was like, this guy's sick. This is another Under the Silver Lake moment.
No.
Like, cool guy. And then like immediately the next shot, you're like, ooh.
Oh, never mind. Not a cool guy.
Not a cool guy at all. No, yeah. So he just seems kind of like unhinged, and like they're all kind of joking around in like a sexual locker room talk type of way, and then he takes it a little too far. Like we've all been in that situation, I'm sure, to some extent.
Yeah, you're joshing around with the boys, and then one of them does the Joaquin Phoenix thing. But
I'm trying to figure out how to like say it in a way that won't get us tagged as explicit. But
to say there's a lady made out of sand that he interacts with.
He interacts with her. And then he goes into the water to
interact
with himself. Yeah. I mean, listen, it's the movie you made me watch. Don't make faces at me like that.
Look, admittedly, I just got to start watching these movies before I recommend them.
What we're getting a pretty good like establishment of his character. Unhinged, sexually obsessed. Actually, there's a great scene where I guess the army psychologist is like smoking and doing a Rorschach test with him to like, I guess test his his mental health or whatever. And he's showing him the different ink blots, and every single one he's like, yeah, it's it's a penis, that's this, that's that. Like it's all dirty.
It's all sexual.
And then there's like a beat, and the doctor goes, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah,
Very fun.
there are some great reactions in this movie. You know, it's
Yeah.
not like a super funny movie, but it
Nope.
has its moments. And that's one of them. But yeah, so whatever problems Freddy has seem to either have been brought about entirely by, or in the very least exacerbated by
By the
like
war.
trauma that he sustained during the war. Because he was in the Pacific
Yeah.
Theater, which was not a fun place to be in World War
No.
II, I'm told.
Yeah, so we kind of see him get released out into the world, and so like his first job is doing family portraits at like a mall or a department store or something
Mhm.
like that. Because I guess he's got skills as a photographer.
The other skill I will say that he has that we see before he gets the job is he's very good at making like homemade booze with
Right.
astonishing potency, apparently. The things that
Right.
I saw, I wasn't even keeping very careful count, but the things I saw him put into these drinks as he makes them throughout the movie are gasoline, rubbing alcohol, and aftershave. So,
Well, I mean, there's that great shot later on when he's like cleaning up in the bathroom and he just like downs a bottle of aftershave. And
yeah,
you're
I
like,
forgot
oh,
all about that. Yeah. You're like, oh.
party on, dude. But yeah, so basically he gets fired from his department store job from like drunkenly getting into a brawl with some guy. Then he goes to work on some sort of, was it like a farm?
Yeah, he becomes like a day laborer of some kind. It's
Yeah.
not entirely clear. He's not
And
there for long.
Yeah, and he makes an alcoholic beverage for one of his Hispanic coworkers who dies. And
Yeah.
so they all are pointing at him and saying, "You poisoned him, you poisoned him." And he goes, "No." And then he runs away and becomes a drifter, a 1940s drifter, I guess.
Yeah.
He drunkenly stumbles onto a yacht where there's seemingly a party going on, and the yacht floats away into the distance. And the next morning, we find out he's stumbled onto the yacht of Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, Lancaster Dodd, which is a grand name.
Yeah. It's about as close as you can get to L. Ron Hubbard while still maintaining plausible deniability.
Absolutely.
And it really works.
I love the first scene with the two of them, where you think that Lancaster Dodd would be mad at Freddie Quayle for drunkenly stumbling onto his ship without permission. But he immediately just starts telling him, like, "I'm a philosopher, and are you scared?" He's like,
"I'm a nuclear physicist," is one of the things he says he is.
That's right. And he's just like wearing a red robe that's like a little bit open. You're like, okay,
yeah,
this is the coolest guy on earth.
Yeah. Philip Seymour Hoffman is very good at, I guess, even in Magnolia, the other Paul Thomas Anderson movie I've seen him in. He's just a little too charismatic for you to ever really realize that he's not supposed to be a great dude.
It's the Tony Soprano problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so he kind of sees something in Freddy, or like they hit it off, which seems weird because you're like, this Freddy guy, he seems to make everyone he's in the room with uncomfortable. But Dodd likes him for whatever reason. I'm not sure if this is the first time where he says, "Have we met before?"
Yeah, so he says, he comments, there's a couple things that he comments on that I wanted to draw attention to. So the first thing is, he says, like, "You seem strangely familiar." And Freddy immediately is like, "Yeah, I think that too." So they've already got, like, there's something going on, right? There's sort of like, you feel familiar. I know I haven't met you. I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
But Dodd also informs him that he is, this is a direct quote, aberrated.
Right.
Which is just a term taken directly from Scientology. And says that last night, Quell told him that he was an able-bodied seaman looking for work, which is, able-bodied seaman is one of the things that Sea Org, the Scientology organization, says that they look for in members. So, you know, they're... In some ways, this movie really dances around the Scientology thing. In other ways, it does not at all. So yeah, as it turns out, Dodd is something of a fan of Freddy's brewing abilities, which is why I brought them up earlier.
Yes, that's right.
I don't remember what exactly he says, but he like holds up the flask and is like, "I must know the contents of this magnificent potion," or something like that. Like,
yeah, he calls it a magic potion, and you're like, "Oh, this guy's cool."
Yeah, this rocks.
Yeah, and so basically he asks Freddy, he's like, "You could make this for me?" And Freddy's like, "I can make something better."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Heck yeah, dude, come to my daughter's wedding," which is happening that day. And so we get to see his daughter get married to another member of his movement, we'll call it, which is known as the Cause, which we kind of pick up on from dialogue. And you get a lot of that fun interaction with Freddy kind of walking around and people asking him questions to him being like, what? Like if
Yeah.
you've ever been in a group of people who have a different religion than you and they ask you a question and you're like, I'm sorry, are you insane? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, it's very funny that like both parties in every interaction he's having are reacting the same way to each other because Freddy is just a weird little freak going around trying to talk to these people.
Yeah.
And they're all weird little freaks in their little cult.
Their little bubble, yeah.
They'll be like, what level of processing are you at?
Yeah, exactly.
And he'll look at them like, I don't know, I just like sex a lot. And they just like walk away. And both of them go like, ugh, what a weirdo. Like,
can you believe that guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, we learned that this cause uses an exercise known as processing, which is not Dianetics. We swear.
Yeah.
We swear it's
not an audit. They just record it for whatever reason.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically, as someone will, in the film will later point out, it's a type of hypnotism where they're asking questions to kind of, with the intent of maybe overcoming, I don't know, trauma. Is that? Yeah.
With Dianetics, it's interesting. I haven't done a ton of looking into it, but we will talk about it in a bit more detail later.
Yeah.
But it is a form of hypnotism. Initially, it's designed to sort of break down a person's will, which is that's a really good and healthy thing to do. And then later on, right, it's functionally regression therapy, right? Where it's like, do you remember your past life? What was happening in your past life? Let's figure out what's wrong there.
But psychiatry is bad, by the way.
Yeah, psychiatry, it's a side note. Yeah, we are with Tom Cruise on that. We just don't like his solution.
Exactly. Yeah, so it is basically like that sort of therapy. And I'm not sure exactly what happens here, but we do get a scene of the two of them together, Dodd and Quell. And Dodd is kind of questioning him. And, you know, Quell's kind of laughing. And he starts to question him about his past. And we learn some seedy stuff. His dad died. His mother was put in like a mental hospital. He might have had a sexual relationship with his aunt.
Yeah, it's not entirely clear. An interesting thing. So yeah, the first time they do it, he's like laughing. He's not really taking it seriously.
Right.
And then Dodd tells him to do the second round of questioning without blinking. Yeah. And every time he blinks, they start over again. And immediately, he's like breaking Freddy down.
By the way, that's how it happens, folks. If you're ever laughing going along with the bit of a cult that you're flirting with, I'm sorry, they gotcha. Hate to break it to you.
Yeah, and anyway. It's very interesting because also like that sort of thing, like that, exercising very minute control over something like that as a way of like breaking down a person's will is something that happens in, you know, like hypnotic contexts or just manipulative and bad ones.
And listen, we know that like hypnotism does have an effect. I know that was a little bit of a debate in your Doug Zone Discord a couple days ago.
I did get slightly triggered, but it's okay.
Oh, it's okay. It's just Coach. He's going to have either a moderately good opinion on something or the dumbest opinion I've ever heard. Love you, buddy. But it's like, we know hypnotism does work, especially on very suggestible people. And someone unstable like the character of Freddy Quell would be the perfect, I would say, victim for that sort of malicious hypnotism. And so that's what happens. And another tidbit we learn about our boy Quell is, boy, I don't even know how to broach this one. He had the love of his life was a 16-year-old girl. We're not sure how old he was, but he's Joaquin Phoenix, so
yeah, he's in the Navy at the time, so
that should tell you something. And like
the good old days, but.
And he's like sneaking up to her window to kiss her, and he's like clearly 40.
Yeah.
And it's just no good, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's very funny because the 16-year-old girl is, you know, obviously this isn't supposed to be very mature for her age, but she's also much more mature than him as a 16-year-old girl, where she's like, I don't know if this is healthy. We maybe shouldn't be doing this. As he's like sitting silently on the park bench, sulking next to her. Yeah,
it's just creepy.
Yeah, I'm not sure entirely what to make of the Doris subplot there. I think it is just sort of more of an indication of the fact that he's not very stable and is sort of just drifting around.
Yeah, I also think that there's something to be said. We get a lot of parts during the movie where we're seeing from his perspective, and it's kind of an unreliable narrator sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she seemed a little too into him in that flashback, which gave me the thought when the movie ended that was like, he was probably just harassing that girl.
Yeah, it's literally just the plot of Joker again, where at the end of the movie there's the flashback and he's sitting alone in the bar.
Yeah.
Great subtle filmmaking from Todd Phillips, but
well, he's no Paul Thomas Anderson, but
maybe that's a good thing.
Maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, so basically Freddy's kind of flirting with this whole cause deal, and for whatever reason Dodd sees something in Freddy,
Mm-hmm.
which may just be because he's also unhinged.
Yeah, I think there's an element of him being unhinged. There's also, he at several points throughout the movie, because his family and pretty much everyone else in the cause is like, get this little weirdo off the boat. We don't like him. I don't like this dude. There's several times where people suggest he might be a government spy, which I thought was a very interesting thing to bring up.
Yeah.
But regardless, Dodd several times throughout the movie is like, well, if we can't fix him, we can't fix anybody. Like, he's the perfect case study. So,
yeah. He will be my biggest achievement yet. You know, that kind of thing.
And like, I don't like that. It's not good.
A little spooky. Yeah, it's a little MK Ultra-y, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, this unstable man that I'm attempting to hypnotize and program. Who knows what I could get him to do? Maybe
what could I possibly program him to do?
Yeah.
To maim?
Yeah.
No.
Program
no.
to drink.
And drink he does.
Yeah, that probably does help. The fact that he makes great prison hooch for Dodd, but regardless, there is something like genuine in their connection as well, which is interesting, I thought.
Yes. And so moving along with the plot, the boat arrives in New York City, the Big Apple, and they go to like a dinner party for like one of his, I guess the lady who lent him the boat, you know, like this kind of socialites he's flirting with, and he's like presenting them with his method, and everybody's like, ooh, and meanwhile Freddy's like walking around the party stealing stuff.
Yeah, stealing a little naked statue.
Is that what it was? Wow.
Yeah, it was like a little statue of a naked woman.
Of course it was. Because you really don't want me to be comfortable no matter what movie we're watching.
Yeah, no, I didn't even realize it until like the last second it was in frame. I was like, is that? Oh my goodness.
I didn't watch it either. It was quick. But yeah, so questionable stuff from Freddy all around. But basically we have a guy kind of vocally doubting Dodd's method. And there's a great scene where Dodd's like talking, you know, kind of his BS, essentially, his con artist, you know, he's talking everybody through his method, and this guy keeps like peeking in the door going, excuse me? Excuse me? For a lot longer than you'd expect him to do. He says
there are no heroes in this scene, but you do have to respect his persistence.
His persistence to be incredibly annoying. And I forget the guy's name. It's something like John Miller or something forgettable, but he basically starts grilling Dodd on the scientific basis of this. Apparently Dodd has been saying the processing cures leukemia, some forms of leukemia.
Another claim that was made about Dianetics, I would like to note.
Is that true?
Hubbard said that in Dianetics, that it could cure some forms of leukemia for the same reason.
It's so funny.
Yeah, he's saying it's a spiritual problem. We'll get into Hubbard's career later on, but he later on claimed that he had been like severely wounded in World War II and cured himself with Dianetics. But side note, he was not and he did not. Just to clear that one up right now.
Shocker. And like that's very clearly what Lancaster Dodd is. Again, though, probably a lot more likable than the real L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh yeah. This guy never hung out with Jack Parsons, so already he's ahead in my book.
He's on the up. And so basically this is the first time we get to see Dodd kind of like lose his cool, and he kind of yells at this guy, and it's very clear who's winning this argument. It's this random guy. And so the night ends, everybody goes home, and then Freddy and I'm forgetting the name of Dodd's son-in-law.
Rami Malek. What is his
Rami
name?
Malek's character.
Yeah, I didn't write it down. I just wrote son-in-law.
They go to this. Somehow they find this guy's house. I don't remember exactly how. And basically they just knock on his door at 3 a.m. and Freddy's like, "We have a gift for you." And then as soon as the guy opens the door, they just attack him.
Yeah, in an almost slapstick scene because you don't see anything. And so they go in and the door closes, and then you just hear like punching sounds,
glasses
and the guy
breaking.
going like, "Oh!"
Yeah. And then it just immediately cuts to like a room, like I guess I don't know if it's the yacht or somewhere else where Dodd is, and Freddy comes in. He's like, "Freddy, we can't be beating people up. That's bad." And that's pretty much all he says to him.
Yeah, Freddy like walks in, he's like, he won't be a problem anymore, and just sort of like snickers. And Dodd is like, "Come on, man, don't do that.
Be chill, Freddy." Yeah, and Amy Adams is not cool with this. And this is kind of where we start to see more and more of everybody being like, "Hey, this guy's unstable." And we get a gross scene with Amy Adams and her husband in the bathroom, which I'm going to skip. And then immediately she goes to Freddie Quell and says, "Stop drinking." And he says, "Okay." And then in the next scene, he sneaks out of a house that they're all hanging out in to drink. And hang out with Val, a.k.a. Little Lancaster Dodd, played by Jesse Plemons, who's the son of... No, he's not the son of Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's the son
of Lancaster Dodd, yeah. Sorry, I don't know why I was just letting you
He's
struggle
just letting
there.
me sit there.
Just sitting there watching.
Staring at me blankly.
I will note, though, it's interesting, right, that the scene with him running out to drink, because the whole movie is about this, like, push and pull between the two people. And Freddy, at several points throughout the movie, reacts violently to people questioning Dodd, but also he, for the whole movie, is just constantly resisting what Dodd and the rest of the cause are telling him.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It's a very weird dynamic.
Well, you sort of get the feeling that, again, he's got this deep connection to Dodd, regardless of whether he cares about the actual, he doesn't want to improve. He just wants to drink and hang out with his boy, essentially.
Yeah.
And do a couple other things.
And who wouldn't? Like, I'd love to hang out with Philip Seymour Hoffman and drink rubbing alcohol together on a boat. It sounds like a great time.
It does sound pretty cool, actually, now that you put it that way. But basically, he goes outside. Dodd is in someone's house doing his little routine of hypnotism. And Freddy sneaks out to drink. And Val, Dodd's son, is out there. And Freddy basically just gets up in his face like, "You should be in there listening to your dad." And Val's like, "Nah, he's just making it up as he goes along."
Val, I would like to note, is correct.
No, he's absolutely right. Yeah, so Freddy kind of like roughs him up a little bit, but then suddenly police officers arrive. So he's like, "Play it cool. You're all right. Don't tell on me," essentially.
Yeah, he like straightens out his jackets like, "All right, we're good." Which is a very funny way to react to seeing the police pull up, is immediately acting as suspicious as possible.
Exactly. But they pull up and they're not here for Freddy. They're here for Dodd, who they have a warrant for his arrest for practicing medicine without a license or something along those lines.
Yeah, and also like wrongful withdrawal of funds. The impression that you get is that whoever he was borrowing the boat from at that party was less than impressed by his response to the guy questioning him.
And actually, it was specifically the lady, because you see him like flip out on the guy and say like some unsavory words, some swear jar words, and it cuts to the lady being like, "Oh my," 'cause she's an old timey lady, and that's what they do.
Yeah, she's like an evil New York wasp. So
yeah, exactly. She's like, "You can't cuss; you just have to take away neighborhoods from poor people." And you're like, "Oh, okay, weird morals, lady." Anyway. Getting mad at a figurative woman we've just invented.
I'm furious at her. The hypocrisy.
But yeah, so basically, that is like sort of the subtext is that like he kind of blew it that night. And so she like in revenge for him ruining her party, she got him on some technicalities for lending him the boat and then kind of changing her tune on it. But also, like, he is sort of practicing medicine without a license. So that's
he says that it's not medicine, but it very clearly is. He's saying that he can heal leukemia. Like
Exactly. And so he's getting arrested, and as he does, Freddy goes ballistic and starts fighting with the cops. So they both get arrested. They end up in the jail.
Yeah.
They're in the wonderful shot. Great scene.
Yeah, it's both the scene in the jail and the scene of the arrest both have some pretty good moments where, like, Dodd is trying to do, like, his big speech style to these Philadelphia police officers, where he's like, on whose authority do you arrest me? And he's like, we're Philadelphia city police officers. So they're like handcuffing him. And then Freddy just starts throwing haymakers and gets wrestled to the ground. But yeah. And then they yell at each other in jail.
Freddy kicks apart a toilet, which is scary. And then they yell at each other, and it's a really good scene. Great shot.
Another quote here. Hang on, let me pull up the quote that I wrote down, because Dodd's just telling him, he's like, this is the reason that you reacted so angrily to this arrest was because in a former life you were traumatized, which, interesting. And he says, here it is, I found the quote. You are asleep. You have been implanted with a push-pull mechanism that keeps you fearful of authority and destructive. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Don't have much more to do with that than raise my eyebrows suggestively, but
as we both do on our audio podcasts.
Yeah. Since we're making faces at each other.
Yeah.
But
it's great radio. But yeah, it's a good scene. It's another, you kind of hear Freddy accusing Dodd of being a fake, and Dodd being like, you're lazy, which is not a great rebuttal.
Yeah, Freddy's like, you're a fake, and Dodd responds with like, yeah, well, everyone hates you except for me, so how about that?
Yeah, exactly. And then, like, he's like, come on, let's be friends again. And he's like, all right, we're friends again.
And the next scene, they're friends again. They like wrestle on the front yard.
And at first, everybody assumes that Dodd is being attacked until they see him laughing, like. And then everyone's like, oh, it's fine. Like, it's funny because there's like someone playing piano, and as it starts happening, like, they stop and everybody stands up, and then slowly the piano starts again. It's like, that's a pretty good portrayal of like when something weird happens at a party.
Yeah. And then like the next 25 minutes, if I remember right, they consist of this montage of just Freddy undergoing various forms of psychological torture and hypnotism. Right? Like there's not yet. Hang on. Did I miss something?
Almost there. We're missing right after that, there's a dinner scene where this is where the son-in-law says, I think he's a spy, and Amy Adams' character, Peggy, is like, whether or not he's a spy, there's something seriously wrong. They're basically trying to convince Dodd, like, ditch this guy, and Dodd's like, well, I'll think about it,
Yeah.
And then is the next scene where they're in the room and he's singing?
Yeah, so there's the scene of them in the room singing, which is just kind of vibes based. I'm just sort of skipping over that because there's really nothing to do with that one. I'm not sure
bad vibes based.
Yeah, bad vibes.
Well, I think it is important because I'm not gonna let you skip over this. You made us watch this film.
Fair
We're gonna
enough.
be uncomfortable together.
Understandable.
Not L. Ron Hubbard. Lancaster Dodd is like,
who I cannot stress this enough, is not L. Ron Hubbard. Don't worry.
Basically, they've got some old lady playing the piano bad and a woman playing the upright bass. Very like church gathering vibes, and everybody's talking, and he's doing his best Linkara impression by singing badly.
A Rovin, which is a fun drinking song. It's a classic little shanty.
Is that?
Yeah. It's a delight.
Yeah, it's a fun scene where we get to see Philip Seymour Hoffman be cool, but it keeps cutting back and forth between him and Freddy, and Freddy's kind of perturbed, or not perturbed. Maybe like he's got some resentment brewing.
Yeah.
And then like at
sort
some
of a darkness
point
about him.
That's the whole movie essentially.
Good point.
Yeah, but no,
more so than usual.
Definitely, there's a new strain in their relationship, and it keeps cutting back between him and Dodd. And then at one point, it cuts back to Dodd, and only the women are nude, which we all have to assume is not happening actually, but is once again Freddy's unreliable perspective.
Yeah,
maybe has something to do with his insecurities and what he sees everybody loving Dodd and him being an outsider, specifically women, who I guess in his mind are only to be naked. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. He's the first incel, really. Like
It really he is. Yeah.
It's not good.
Joaquin
And then
Phoenix,
we get
the classic incel archetype.
And then we move on from that gross thing to the fun of the psychological torture and hypnotism.
Hey, listen, this was just payback for you making me watch this movie.
No, understandable. I deserve it.
We're gonna revel in this. But yes. So then the next scene is they're in somebody's house again, and Dodd is doing some more processing on Freddy. Could you describe this for us, please?
Sure. So there's several different things that we see overlapping. So there's one scene of Peggy, the Amy Adams character, who's Dodd's wife, where she's like reading like a dirty story of some kind to Freddy as he's there like, I don't like this. And she's like, please just sit still and listen.
Yeah.
There's another scene.
Yeah, that one was weird.
Yeah, that one's weird. But it's the same point being made as all the other ones, right? Where it's like, he's unstable and they're using it. Then there's also a scene where she's doing a concentration exercise with him and has him look into her eyes and describe their color. And so at first they're green, and then she says, turn them blue. And in a pretty neat trick, her eyes do slowly turn blue. And a little later we cut back to him, and she says, turn them black. And he does. And
That was
her eyes
scary.
slowly turn black. Yeah, it's spooky. And, well, I will just touch on that real quick, because I thought that was really interesting, because it's the most subtle thing about the movie, I think, is probably that part of it, right? Where you can look at it and go like, well, there's nothing really bad about that. He didn't actually make her eyes change color, right? That wasn't magic. That was just him convincing himself he had done that.
Right.
As longtime listeners of this show will know, that's exactly what magic is. Which is... Right? That's sort of why I wanted to draw my attention to it, right? Because it is just him shaping his perception of the world in such a way that he's like, through will, changing it. Even if that's just in his perception. Which is very Crowleyan. Which I bring up for no reason.
For no reason at all. Yeah, and that's a good point.
Yeah, and then the final bit of this thing is Dodd is having him walk with his eyes closed back and forth across a room and describe what he feels. And he seems to have him do it for several hours. And by the end of it, he's like on the verge of a mental breakdown. He's like punching holes in the wall going, it's still wood. And he walks over to the glass. He's like punching that. He does pause and take a smoke break at one point, and he's like pretending to walk going like, I'm getting really tired, guys, while they're all out to lunch. And then by the end of that scene, though, he puts his hands up against the window and starts describing how he can feel like the trees and the house through the glass and the stars outside and other worlds. And at that point, he's been broken, is what happened, right? It's not that he like unlocked some new part of his soul.
Well, Dodd might call it a breakthrough.
Yeah.
Right?
It was
and
a breakdown, but yeah. So
they've
he gets
tortured
that
this man
reinforcement.
into a mental break, and everybody applauds and they hug.
Yeah, something which no cults would ever do.
No, absolutely not. So I guess we should move along a little bit. What is the next thing that happens? They go to the desert.
Yeah, they go to the desert. They
gotta
dig
go to
up
the desert.
Dodd's unpublished writings,
which it's very funny that he had it buried in a box in the desert, and to go out there with just him and Freddy, he's got a revolver strapped to his side and a rifle.
Yeah, and Freddy's holding the shovel like it's like a spear. Like they are terrified that someone would steal his unpublished works. And earlier on, when Rami Malek, the son-in-law, was talking about how he was worried that Freddy was a spy, he mentions explicitly that he mentioned the unpublished work, and Freddy, according to him, asked how much something like that would be worth. So this is another show on Dodd's part of the fact that either he doesn't think he's taking a risk with Freddy, or he doesn't care. But after his son-in-law told him,
maybe that's why he has the guns.
Or he's ready to shoot Freddy with a revolver, which would be a wild direction for this movie to take. And so then they publish.
You say this as if the end of this movie is normal.
That is a good point. But so they publish book 2, The Split Saber. Which is the next big step in the cause, and it changes some things.
there's a great shot where they're like, they have it printed and they're like panning down like the open cover with like the title page. It's the split saber. And then it's like, I forget what the subtitle is. And
it's
then
like
it says
a gift to Homo sapiens, I think.
Yeah, it's a gift to Homo sapiens. And then it says Lancaster Dodd, MOC, PhD, MD. It's like,
it's really good.
He's none of those things. There's no way.
But so it changes a couple things, and Freddie speaks with the publisher of the book, who asks him what he thinks of it, and Freddie just asks the publisher what he thinks, which, in my opinion, is because he has not read it.
Right.
But the publisher's like, I think it stinks. This could have been a 3-page pamphlet. He's a great thinker, but a terrible writer.
Yeah.
And Freddie takes him out into the alleyway and beats him senseless.
Yep. And while that's happening, Dodd's just sort of chilling on a bench, and Laura Dern,
a national treasure, just as a side
national
note.
treasure, he comes up and he's like, "How you enjoying the book?" And she's like, "Oh, it's great. Except on page 13, you said this, whereas in your last book, you said..." And she starts kind of like grilling him on some of the details and how they're maybe contradicting with some of his earlier works. And he's like, "Shut up," basically.
Yeah, because it's that he changed it from like, do you recall something in your past life to can you imagine something in your past life?
Right.
And she's like, well, that makes it sound like they're making it up. And at first she's like, yeah, this is the new thing. And then she like asks like one more question. He blows up at her.
And it's funny because she's not even like the other guy grilling him that hard. Like, she's clearly asking in good faith.
Yeah, she's
like,
very sycophantic throughout the whole movie. Like,
it's like he could have like talked his way out of that one very easily, but I guess he's just not in the mood for it, and he yells at National Treasure Laura Dern, as you said before.
Yeah, the unpardonable sin that he commits in this movie.
Absolutely cannot. And then they're in the desert again, and he's on a motorcycle.
Yeah,
and he's
playing
driving
pick
around.
a point.
Which, it's pretty sick to go out with your son-in-law, your daughter, and some insane man into the desert and be like, "Get on my motorcycle, let's drive around." So like he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna drive towards that thing," and then he drives, and his daughter goes, "Yay, daddy!"
Yeah, it's very funny. She's like cheering and jumping up and down while Freddie and the son-in-law are just watching with their hands on their hips.
And he's just driving a motorcycle through the desert, which, by the way, does look very fun.
It looks awesome.
It's another one of those moments where I'm like, yeah, but this guy is cool.
Yeah, it's like he's winning me over again. Like,
but yeah, so then he gets off and he's like, "All right, Freddie, pick a point." And Freddie's like, he picks some point and he starts driving, and they're like, "Nice job." And then the daughter's like, "Yay, Freddie."
Yeah.
He goes, "He's going real fast."
Yeah.
And it lasts for like 5 minutes of Freddie just like driving away on the motorcycle until finally they like do a wide shot and you realize he's not coming back.
Yeah, he's driving away on the motorcycle.
And it's fun. It's a little sad too. It's a little melancholic because you're like, poor guy. You liked Freddie, and now.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this movie, right? Is it does a very good job of showing that this relationship, right? And we'll get into what exactly the relationship is a little later, but no matter what it is, right? It's
hey, buddy, keep it clean.
Yeah. It's clearly like abusive, right? And not good, right? One of them is an insane cult leader, and the other one is an insane cult member.
Right.
But also, like, there is clearly a genuine connection between them, and there's something there. And I like that the movie doesn't try to make it like a purely like, you should feel bad if this happens sort of thing, right? Like, it's very clear that it's not good.
Right, but they feel like people still.
Yeah, it's very human.
Yeah. Which I think is that's the mark of good storytelling. Because, like, again, we talk about the Tony Soprano effect. Like, you can still like notice a character's good qualities and then like still have them be bad people. Yeah. And that's good. That's important to have that nuance in film. But anyway, he flies away on his motorcycle. Does he go back to try and meet up with Doris?
Yeah, Freddie goes back to Maine to try and meet up with Doris.
Doris, by the way, I don't think I mentioned her by name. That's his formerly 16-year-old girlfriend.
Yeah, who we learned earlier. That's like his one big regret in life is that he didn't marry this child. So,
Yeah.
You can tell how sympathetic I am to his struggle there. But yeah, he shows up to Doris's house, and her mom answers the door and is like, "Oh, what's up, Freddie? We haven't seen you in like 5 years. How you been?"
Yeah.
And he learns that Doris is now married and living with her husband.
And how does he respond, Matt? Does he fly into a rage and punch the mom's skull?
No, he just falls asleep drunkenly in a movie theater. He just sort of like wanders
Well,
off.
before that, he says he seems pretty happy for her. Genuinely.
Oh yeah.
He says, "Say hi to everyone for me," and wanders off. So my point being, Dianetics. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
the process works.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? Because throughout the movie, you see him start to like make steps towards improving a little bit, and then he regresses in ways that you can never be sure if like the help or the improvement that he's making is because he's just like he has a good relationship with a human being and he's like finally understanding connection, or if it's like that the insane brainwashing is like crushing his mental illness, and it's never entirely clear. But yeah,
exactly.
And he goes into a movie theater and just like passes out drunk, and then another instance of someone just sort of finding another person sort of eerily is like one of the employees walks in with a phone and is like, "We got a call for you," and it's Dodd. And Freddy's like, "Hey, how did you find me?" And Dodd's just like, "Don't worry about it. I miss you, man."
One thing that's interesting about this is that in the IMDb summary, which I have been referencing, it says it basically like you say, like he's somehow mysteriously located him. In the Wikipedia, if I remember correctly, it says he was dreaming and then takes the dream literally. Let me see if I can find that again.
Interesting. I might have just forgotten that it was supposed to be a dream.
I read that somewhere. And then like he takes it literally. Oh, it's not the Wikipedia. Where did I read that?
Interesting.
Strange.
It's possible that it was a dream. This
maybe
movie,
I
even
just dreamed that. Wow.
Even it's like real scenes, the quote unquote real ones, are very dreamlike. Like it's a very hazy movie.
Here it is. Okay, sorry, I got it backwards. The Wikipedia says that the IMDb says while sleeping in a movie theater, Freddy has a vision of Dodd, who calls him by the telephone, having mysteriously located him, and tells him to come visit him. Taking the dream literally, he travels across the Atlantic to reunite with Dodd.
Interesting. Okay.
And it's one of those things where this whole movie is kind of cagey with its plot in general. So like that was a moment where I was like, is this a dream or is this real? I mean, I don't know a lot about the 50s, but a guy carrying out a long corded telephone into the auditorium seemed sort of surreal to me.
Yeah.
But maybe that could be like a thing they did. I don't know. They used to
that
pump
was sort of my
gas,
take on it. Was that it was supposed to be a little weird, but that it did happen. I must have missed. I don't know when they say that it was like a vision. That's interesting.
I don't think they explicitly say it, but that's what this says
so
here.
Just everybody else
synopsis,
going. People being slightly less comfortable with things making no sense, going, "This has to be fake." And I'm like, "Nah, I think that happened."
Yeah. It can be surreal. Yeah.
Yeah, me reading through the Augsburg Book of Miracles. But
yeah. So basically, he follows him to England across the Atlantic.
He shows up in England.
Dodd says he is.
He's greeted by a very obedient Val, I would like to note, like dressed in a suit, clearly very, or at least appearing very happy to be there, which is in stark contrast to what he was saying earlier about his dad making it all up. So I thought that was an interesting note. Yeah.
Folks, we got him. It's also like he has a school. It's like clearly like a boarding school. Like there's young people in what do you call that, uniform, walking around. Like he goes up to the front desk and they're like asking him if he wants to enroll or something, and like giving him papers, and he's kind of like laughing at the whole thing. He being Freddy, by the way. And then that's where he meets Val, who leads him to his father's office where Dodd and Peggy are in their new, I guess, school that they just have.
Yeah. It's not entirely explained, because it's also not like entirely clear how much time passes between these things. But it's clearly been a bit of time. Because he is established here. Like he's clearly had time to put in some roots.
Yes. And this is where we get that, they kind of go, "Why did you come back?" And we get that great line from Peggy. Do you want to drop that one on us?
For sure. So she says, let me make sure I get the exact line.
Yeah.
Yeah, she says, "This is something you do for 1,000,000,000 years or not at all." Uh, which,
Ooh.
eye emoji.
Yeah.
Uh,
Little spoopy.
yeah, and so yeah, that's sort of the vibe off of Peggy. He also at one point he asks about Elizabeth, who is the daughter whose wedding he attended.
Yeah.
He asks where she is, and Peggy quietly says DCF, and we don't learn what that is, but it just sort of from her tone, it sounds like it's the film's version of the RPF, which we'll talk about later.
Okay.
Point being, it's not a good place to be.
Is she in hell? What?
More like prison. Yeah. So it's hang on. I'll jump down to it right now. Yeah. So it's RPF is Rehabilitation Project Force. Which was like it's functionally just manual labor for Scientologists who aren't doing Scientology right. A sort of annoying thing that I found is that every single resource I could find on it made the same comparison with like it was like Soviet gulags, which like I watched several YouTube videos on it. They all said that. I read several articles. None of them could think of any other instances of forced labor and prison camps.
We get it, Matt. Russia did nothing wrong.
Look, I'm just saying, they weren't Scientologists, at least.
I'll give him that.
Yeah, but yeah. So from L. Ron Hubbard's perspective, he was like, it was a way to like reframe them and get them to focus on the things that mattered again. And people who like left the camps were like, yeah, we were there for years in like rat-infested basements, and our loved ones weren't allowed to contact us. So
it was torture.
Yeah, it was torture and illegal. I'd like to note imprisonment. Private organizations aren't allowed to do that,
right?
And Scientologists just do. Not good.
No good.
I think the RPF is technically discontinued, or in the very least, it's not functioning in the same way as openly. So that's good.
Well, yeah, hopefully that's not where, what's her name? Something Miscavige is?
Oh, yeah.
Who can say?
She's somewhere out there.
And I hope she's all right. Yeah, so basically Peggy leaves, and we kind of get a final scene between Dodd and Freddy. And this is the point where Dodd's finally like, all right, buddy. Ultimatum.
Mm-hmm.
You either stay with us or I never want to see you again. And then Freddy's like, well, we'll see each other again in the next life. And Dodd's like, no, if we see each other in the next life, you will be my enemy.
And I will show you no mercy.
Yes, that's right.
The reason that Freddy says that, just as a side note, is because Dodd starts this by saying, I figured out why you're so familiar to me. Which is that,
right.
Yeah, he tells them that in a past life, I don't remember if it was World War I or what it was, but they were in a city under siege by Prussian forces, and they were in charge of floating out mail balloons during this like terrible winter.
Yes.
And it's interesting because he like is very passionate about it. Throughout the whole movie, it's never entirely clear how much Dodd buys what he's selling. Like he's clearly making things up as he goes along, but you can't tell if he
buys a little bit of it. We don't know
exactly.
How much. Yeah.
Like you can't tell like how much of it is him like consciously going, I'm tricking these rubes, and how much of it is him like going like, I've uncovered yet another secret because I'm just that good.
Yeah.
Which also I think speaks to Philip Seymour Hoffman's charisma, right? He's very good at playing this guy who
is a liar. Yeah, and I don't know, like I get the feeling that like he feels strongly about him and Freddy having met before. So like I kind of buy into him believing that they've met before in a past life. But yeah, I was curious, what was your read on the specifics of them, being essentially floating these secret messages out of a sieged city? Like what do you think that means?
I thought that like it's so heavy with symbolism, right? For like both on like a meta level and in the text, right? Because all throughout the movie, right, like any good cult leader, Lancaster Dodd is constantly hammering into his followers the fact that he's under attack from the world and that nobody trusts him. And so I think that's, of course, the biggest thing, right? These guys are kindred spirits in a way, even though they're so different. And it does seem like Dodd, on some level, is really like, this is the guy I can trust. He's the one who he takes out into the desert to dig up his box of manuscripts.
Right.
And so that was the way I read it on that level. If you wanted to be really like noited about it, right? What is this film but a weather balloon floating out in this sort of thing? This movie that is very much like giving the vibes like, hey guys, Scientology's not that great. While also flying under the radar enough to avoid any real anger.
A real backlash.
Or at least any public backlash about it that's too serious.
Yeah.
So those were the two like immediate interpretations I had. Did you have anything?
That was about it. Yeah, I think you brought up some fascinating points I hadn't considered, but my read was definitely like the two of the camaraderie that you would have with that type of that sort of trust and bond that like you're forged in the fires and together you're being oppressed by the outside world, because they both kind of don't fit in with society at large, right? In the grand scheme of things. One of them's just a little more cool and can hang better than the other one. But yeah, like they're definitely, like you said, kindred spirits. Or as Plato might say, their souls had been separated in a past life.
Yeah.
Together, who can say? But yeah, so basically that's the end of it. Freddy leaves. He meets a lady in the bar. And I don't know if this actually happens, but we see them, doing what it is that Freddy loves to do so much, which is repeat the questions from processing while he sleeps with a lady that he doesn't know very well.
Yeah.
Which is another uncomfortable one. And then immediately after that, it cuts to him lying on a beach with the sculpture, the sand woman that the other guys made at the beginning. And kind of a post-coitus type position, which makes you question if he really slept with that lady.
It was all a dream.
Is it all a dream? No, this guy's just a pervert.
Yeah. I do think that it very much like Under the Silver Lake, right? The fact that the main character is this unreliable little freak also gives it gives the filmmaker a bit of an out, right? Because you can just go like, no, he's the unreliable narrator. See, it was all just about how he doesn't respect women. Which,
exactly.
In both of these movies, that is part of what it's about.
Yeah.
But that's not all of what it's about.
Yeah. Noticing a theme of the movies you recommend to me.
Yeah, look, hey.
Creepy guy who doesn't respect women. And the other one
accidentally gets embroiled in a conspiracy.
Well, the other one we didn't mention was Dragged Across Concrete, which we have not watched on this show, which also shows a lack of respect for women, but in a different way.
That movie rocks. It is so funny to me. Like the first we can cut this, but in like the first 5 minutes, like none of this would have happened if people weren't so sensitive about race and if police officers were being paid more. And I was like, this movie is incredible.
And it's like, this woman wants to work after having a baby, blow her face off.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
anyway.
She doesn't want to work. Her husband makes her go to work.
Right,
She
but
wants
she
to stay
goes
home.
to
This
work.
movie. The movie is about how women yearn for the home. But
and if they leave, God help them.
Who knows what will happen?
Anyway.
We should talk about Dragged Across Concrete next time.
Nope.
Good. Okay, so that's the movie.
That's the movie. Quick thoughts. How did you feel about it, Matt?
It was good. I like the movie. Sus people involved with making it. Tom Cruise didn't hate it, which means it can't be that accurate of a portrayal of Scientology. But you know what? Yeah, I think it does a good job at doing what it does, and it is so well filmed. And that the cinematography really does help me forgive some of its more questionable aspects. I'm going to be real.
Well, I think those aspects they're questionable for a reason. I don't think you're supposed to leave this movie going, well, that was a good time.
Yeah, of
kind of like There Will Be Blood, right? It's like, you're not supposed to be like, well, we all had fun. We all learned a lesson. No,
and
it's
Daniel Day-Lewis won.
Exactly. So like, I've been giving you a hard time, but no, it was a very good movie. I'm glad I watched it, but I'm also perturbed. But yeah, I think it was superbly made. Let's talk about some of the, we're already an hour in, surprisingly, but
yeah, whoops, we took a little bit. Eventually we'll learn. I know we talked about this beforehand. I was like, I bet we can just do a plot summary. Eventually we'll learn we take too long with those, but
yeah, because we can't remember anything between either of us.
Yeah, half of it's just us going, wait, hang on, let me double check.
Do you want to get into our like real world like analysis and application and stuff?
Sure. So, admittedly, another reason that we took so long in the plot summary is a good deal of the Scientology parallels and stuff we've already discussed a little bit here.
Right.
But that's the big elephant in the room, right? There's the fact that some of the processing questions are just straight up pulled from the Scientologist playbooks for like initial interviews and later audits.
Right. Well, and even Anderson himself says that the character is inspired by L. Ron Hubbard, and he says that like he did research on Dianetics and the early followers while writing the script. So like that's what this is. I wanted to note some of his other inspirations, though. Can I do that?
Yeah, go for it.
The life story of John Steinbeck, writer of Mice and Men. Some people might recognize him as the novel V by Thomas Pynchon, which interesting. Thomas Pynchon being a writer who I've noticed gets quite a lot of lip service in this paranoid sort of leftist leaning group that we see. Don't wiggle your eyebrows at me. And then again, Dianetics and L. Ron Hubbard. So that kind of also made me waggle my eyebrows a bit too.
Yeah, and John Steinbeck, side note, was a Freemason. I forgot to mention that when you brought him up. And I also wanted to Google it to make sure, but thought I remembered that.
Smart.
Just something to note. Anyway, so there's some of the other Scientology things. Like I said, we talked about the processing things and Dianetics. We mentioned this, of course, like the startling resemblance that it bears to hypnosis.
Yes.
But I would like to note, don't just take it from us, take it from the Church of Scientology, which has stated that the reason that L. Ron Hubbard was so good at Dianetics was because he was a very powerful hypnotist beforehand. And this is part of a trend when it comes to the way the church talks about L. Ron Hubbard, which is to say, they will say something that is so overtly eyebrow-raising. And because L. Ron Hubbard lied about his life so much, it's hard to know if it's real or not, right? Like he said that he was like this great Navy intelligence guy. There was a report published about him, I don't have it on hand, that was like, he's very incompetent, and if we want him to be useful in the future, we will have to watch him closely. Which, I'm not saying that isn't suspicious, just like L. Ron Hubbard's interest in hypnosis.
A little bit of a Freddie Quill situation.
Yeah, exactly. But do remember, we need to take everything about him with a grain of salt, right? But
Right.
There's a couple things about him that I do want to just quickly note.
Let's hear him.
Like when he, later on in his life, was fleeing from various tax collecting agencies all around the world, he was on his ship in Sea Org and had a weird habit of pulling into docks right around the time that revolutions occurred nearby. And the most notable time that happens was when they were in 1975? Yeah, they docked at a port and were explicitly stated, it was explicitly stated by people in the dock that they thought that it was a CIA operation, and they started throwing rocks at the boat. So they had to they had to raise anchor and ship out. So that's very interesting, right? The Scientologists have this weird relationship with the CIA and intelligence where on one hand, they're like, L. Ron Hubbard is this master spy. And on the other hand, they're like, they were the cause of several huge leaks of CIA information in the 80s because they were breaking into government offices and stealing files. So it's like this weird, it's a push-pull mechanism, if you would.
It's very interesting. So there's no then consensus, would you say, on what exactly that relationship is? Concretely?
Yeah, it's other people. Yeah, other people that we sort of mentioned, right? Like Jimmy Fallon Gong of Program to Chill has stated a couple times pretty clearly that he thinks that L. Ron Hubbard was an asset, and I don't know if I'd go so far as to say he was an asset. I will, however, make the disclaimer that I'm not as smart as Jimmy Fallon Gong, so please, Program to Chill fans, don't come for me. But he obviously was tied up with things in some way, right? Like
there's a correlation there that's hard to overlook.
Yeah, any cult leader with a big interest in mind control and hypnosis is going to be rubbing elbows with CIA people, whether they know it or not, right? Like Jim Jones, for instance, yeah. Funny to name a completely random example. I did also briefly want to talk about Sea Org, which is his little group of boats, right, that he was the commander of in his time, L. Ron Hubbard was. unlike in the movie, it's not staffed. His boats weren't mainly staffed by adults. They were mainly staffed by 14 to 16-year-old girls in short shorts and halter tops, which
Yikes.
don't like that.
No.
There's also the lifetime contract, which extends 1 billion years into the future. Which
sounds familiar.
That one's pretty famous, so most people probably know why we drew attention to the billion-year thing. But if you didn't,
I actually didn't know that
do.
before. You just said it right there.
Yeah, and so yeah, the RPF is, I believe, a branch off of Sea Org, but it might be a branch off of like one of their other, like they have several like sub organizations. It's very like, yeah, no, it's Sea Org. I just double checked.
Okay.
And there's the thing I mentioned earlier, just another like weird sus thing about Scientology. There's a lot of them, so I'm sort of picking and choosing my favorites right now because we ran a little over time. But
yeah,
I referenced auditing process R2. What is it? Hang on, R245. So that was a process by which L. Ron Hubbard said that you could split a person's soul from their body, or their thetan, right? That's the name for the soul. These immortal beings that are reincarnated through several lifetimes.
Yes.
Sound familiar? And he described it as splitting their soul from their body, like it's one of the ultimate forms of auditing. And at several points throughout his career, he like referenced doing this with a revolver. So it's believed by some that R245 is just a reference to killing people.
Okay, was he shooting the souls out of people's bodies?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Is the traditional conception of a soul leaving a body is that it's death, right?
Right.
And the church is always like, no, it's just like, it's a metaphor, it's a joke, right?
Yeah. Well,
but also, he published, like, there were several instances where he would publish the names of people that were very critical of Scientology, and he would call them, like, enemies of humanity and life itself. And this is one instance in particular. And he said any Scientologist who comes into contact with them should immediately use auditing process R245. Which, if that's a joke, that's a really weird joke.
That's a dark joke, guys.
Yeah. Personally, if I was running an organization like this, and I didn't want, and there had been controversies about members of the organization hurting people critical of it in the past, I probably wouldn't make jokes like that myself, but, you know, I'm simply built different.
To each his own, yeah.
Yeah. His wife, Mary Sue Hubbard, sort of took the fall for Operation Snow White, which was one of the biggest private infiltrations of government agencies ever. Yeah, it was, I don't remember the exact numbers. It was like 135 government organizations were infiltrated by several thousand Scientologists. And they would basically just go in and steal and destroy any like negative records on L. Ron Hubbard they could find, while also trying to collect records on everybody else. Which, again, with that like weird pseudo CIA thing, right? Because the CIA was doing this exact same thing, right?
Right.
One of the things that was leaked by the Scientologists was about MK Ultra, and they mentioned that the fact that like the CIA released the whooping cough in Florida in the 50s. And when asked for comment, the CIA's official response was, sorry, Richard Helms destroyed our records of that, so we don't know if it happened or not.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so,
you know. You just say no, guys.
Yeah.
You just say no.
Yeah, I can neither confirm nor deny. It's not good if that somehow would be a better response, but going... We destroyed all evidence of that, you know, like an innocent person would. So the jury's out. But, oh well.
That's crazy. Yeah, this really does feel like the relationship between the two of them feels like a I learned it from watching you, Dad kind of scenario.
Yeah. And there's all these like weird lies that Hubbard made about his military service, right? And his importance in military intelligence. And so everything about his biography is like that. And honestly, I feel like I would need to read like every single biography written on him in order to like say with certainty the degree to which he was pulling the strings or his strings were being pulled. But
with a lot of history, it's gonna be a mixed bag, I think. With these type of figures.
Yeah, I have one final note, if you don't mind. Just one other thing that I thought of.
Sure. and then we can maybe talk about his son.
Oh yeah. Here, talk about his son real quick, and then
Okay.
I'll tie it back to the movie. I'll put a nice little bow on things.
Sure. Yeah. So much like in real life, in the movie, Lancaster Dodd's son seemingly kind of is not as jazzed about this whole movement as everyone else. And in real life, L. Ron Hubbard Jr. also became a pretty staunch critic of his father. And I just had one little quote I pulled from a 80s Penthouse interview with him, where he talked about how deeply involved in occult and black magic his father was, and that Aleister Crowley's death was a pivotal event which, quote, led Hubbard to take over the mantle of the beast, end quote. And then he also furthermore went on to say, quote, "Black magic is the inner core of Scientology. My father did not worship Satan. He thought he was Satan," end quote. Now, he railed pretty hard. He said some pretty crazy stuff, like his father being a KGB asset and a drug addict and a Satanist, and, was involved with drug smuggling and statutory rape and all this stuff. Some of these things a lot more believable than others. Just gonna say.
The KGB agent thing, I will say, just a quick side note.
Yeah.
Something I picked up, I don't remember where I heard this, but apparently one of Hubbard's wives, one of his ex-wives, started sleeping with another Scientologist, and Hubbard called the FBI and told them that they were communists.
Wow.
Yeah. The FBI, for their part, did not believe it, and the note that they wrote down was something like, "This man is clearly unwell," which I thought was very funny. That in the height of the Red Scare, he's like, "These people are communists," and I'm like, this guy's a little crazy.
Wacko.
That Hoover's FBI didn't believe that is a sign of something.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's funny that he was basically doing the 60s or 50s version of swatting someone. But yeah, so my whole point is to say, like, I think we can trust his son a little bit in some of this stuff, but we also have to remember, like, he's pretty biased as a critic of his father.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also dead now, so we can't know his mind for sure. But, if some of what he's saying is true, that reflects badly on, the internal processes of Scientology under Hubbard at the very least, right? Yeah. So that was my point about. Oh, and there was another thing, because, by the way, we have a lot of extra time because we did take that quick break. So
good, right? Yeah.
Off, yeah. So don't feel rushed. But Scientology is most famous for some of its celebrity.
Yes, yeah.
Followers. So I went on Wikipedia and went through the list of famous celebrities, and there's a lot of them. But I got a brief list of current practicing Scientologists. I figured I'd just read it and maybe what they did if you don't recognize them.
Yeah, for sure.
So Anne Archer, the actress, famous actress. Nancy Cartwright, who you might recognize as the voice for Bart Simpson.
Oh.
Tom Constantin, do you recognize him?
He
was a keyboardist with the Grateful Dead from 1968 to 1970.
Well, now, fortunately, we know they weren't involved with anything weird, so we can just move on.
We can move on. No, nothing weird there. Tom Cruise, as I said before. Sky Dayton, the founder of Earthlink.
Oh, okay.
Robert Duggan, the billionaire CEO of a biopharmaceutical company named Pharmacy Clicks. Vivian Kubrick.
That one I did know.
The daughter of Stanley Kubrick. Elizabeth Moss, obviously. Michael Pena, which I don't think means anything. It's just funny.
Wait, really?
Michael Pena. Yep. Isn't that hilarious?
Yeah, I agree. That is funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it's funny.
It's funny, yeah. John Travolta, which is one everyone knows. Edgar Winter, the musician, which I didn't know. And until his death, or around the time of his death, Charles Manson.
Spooky.
So I did some quick counting, and there's plenty of others on that list which I didn't feel the need to cite, but 31 of who were listed were actors, 2 were writers/directors, 12 were musicians, and 5 were business people, most of them being CEOs. Fascinating. There's also some former members, like Leah Remini's the biggest one because she's made a lot of like anti-Scientology stuff. But also Priscilla Presley and Lisa Marie Presley, which another thing is interesting. So those are some fun stats on current and former Scientologists. And there's some other interesting ones. So I encourage anybody to kind of look into that. I think there's some, maybe if we want to come back to Scientology one day, there's some more digging to be done on kind of its relationship with Hollywood, I think.
Yeah, as it relates to certain weird scenes that occurred near a canyon.
In sort of, yeah.
But yeah, no, I definitely agree. There's definitely gas in the tank for a Scientology thing. I mean, there's like a whole podcast just dedicated to talking about Scientology. There's a lot you can do.
For sure.
Listeners, thank you for listening to us instead of them.
Yeah, I know. Just stumble our way through trying to remember yet another sex pervert movie.
Yeah, I think someone's naked in this one. I don't remember. I'm glad that you brought up the thing about Crowley, though, because that was the last note I wanted to make.
Let's hear it.
And before I say this, I'm going to admit, I know that this is not an intentional thing that Paul Thomas Anderson did, but all I have is a Crowley-shaped hammer, and everything looks like a thalamic nail. And I just wanted to note that the relationship between... So, several critics commented on there being a sort of like homoerotic subtext to the relationship between these two guys.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I see it entirely. I can see it if you're looking for it, but I read this before... I read several of these reviews before I watched the movie again. And maybe it was just sort of the combination of that with, my newfound noided perspective. But the relationship between this older sort of spiritual master and a younger, more unstable guy really made me think about like an Aleister Crowley and Victor Neuberg type of relationship. Yeah. Which is, throughout the movie, we see that Dodd is at his best and writing most prolifically when he's with Neuberg, just like when he's with Freddie, like Crowley was, how he was
with Neuberg. Yeah.
Objectively, he was doing his most powerful magic, whatever you think that means when he's with Neuberg. And I just thought that was super interesting, given L. Ron Hubbard's interest in and relationship with the Lama, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked about Jack Parsons.
Yes.
And Hubbard's relationship with Parsons's girlfriend at the time, of course, is what led to the Babylon working, where everybody's both hosts' problematic favorite Marjorie Cameron shows up. So there's it's just it's all tied up. So I just sort of wanted to bring that up, right? And the fact that
Here's
was
the thing. I don't even know. I mean, I see what you're saying. I know you're kind of building a bit of a defense in for yourself by saying Paul Thomas Anderson didn't do it on purpose. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here, and I'm going to agree with you here a little bit and say, I think there's a very large likelihood that he did know about that, considering that by his own admission, he studied the beginnings of Dianetics and the life of L. Ron Hubbard, which it's hard to ignore the Crowleyan influence on him.
Yeah.
And so if he dug a little bit into it, it would be very easy to find that stuff. So that sort of push-pull, if you will, might very well have been inspired by that. In some form or another, and maybe we'll never know. But I think it's a very good point that you made, because as soon as you mentioned that, I was like, oh yes, that's exactly like not exactly, but that's very similar and reminiscent of the kind of power dynamic between Neuberg and Crowley, and sort of, the charismatic spiritual leader and sort of the more, not unhinged, but the more fragile and susceptible follower. Yeah.
And that, I think, just sort of on a more concrete note, because that was like the big thing that I was really thinking of throughout my whole time watching the movie, was that relationship and that sort of, thalamic influence that you can just sort of feel it like reverberating. Like we said, we joke about him being the recurring villain, but his influence Crowley's influence really does still reverberate throughout Hollywood.
Absolutely. Well, and, if you think about it, what did Crowley call himself? Who did he attest to be?
Let me think. Let me remember.
Yeah, think about it a little bit. It's somebody L. Ron Hubbard also might have said he was.
Yeah, some great beast.
Guy by the name of Hasatan.
Yeah.
Satan. So
we're dancing around it, but it was very interesting. I found a lot of people saying like, Hubbard studied many people, and Crowley was simply one of them, and people who know nothing latch on to that. And it's like, no, it's very obvious. He was doing sex magic with Jack Parsons to bring about Babylon, the goddess, the Scarlet Woman. Like,
which is exactly what this type of dork would do.
Exactly. Yeah, he was a bad science fiction author and then a bad person, like, but
a pretty good cult leader.
A pretty good cult leader, unfortunately. Weird that correlation happens. But anyway, on a more concrete note, though, just like Victor Neuberg, right, how his life sort of fell apart after he left Crowley, and how, presumably, Freddie's life is not going to go great post-Lancaster Dodd. It's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B when it comes to the fact that cults like this are going to attract unstable personalities and people who are looking for structure and meaning. But also, if you're doing things designed specifically to break someone down, right? Like the sort of things that Crowley would do to Neuberg, or like forcing someone to walk back and forth and touch a wall and a window for hours at a time, you're not going to help them. Right. At least not in any permanent way that matters.
No.
And, it's important to remember, if you're in this sort of group where they're isolating you from other people and telling you that only they have the answers, everybody else is out to get you.
Right.
It's probably not a good sign. So, just exercise caution when someone professes to have all of the answers of the universe.
Unless
they're a Marxist.
No.
Yeah, you can trust us. What I will say, actually, though, is, look, obviously...
I was going to say God.
Yeah, God, naturally, that as well. Of course, obviously, you can... it's a matter of personal choice, right? You figure out what you want to believe. But general rule of thumb, if they're mentioning aliens or your soul being billions of years old and implanted on Earth through a giant volcano, maybe don't trust them specifically.
Sure.
That's not good.
You have to... there was, when we were talking about brainwashing in the Manchurian Candidate episode so many times ago, there was that talk about cult activity inhibiting stop and think thought processes. And if at any point your belief system or your yoga group or your, Nexium style, whatever you're getting involved with, if at any point they're not letting you stop and think and, understand what they're teaching you.
Yeah.
If we're going to offer any sort of, I guess, positive, calls to action or whatever after talking about a movie and calling each other perverts for the last 2 hours, we're going to have to try to have any sort of takeaway.
Yeah, I think that's it. And also a more obvious one, right, is if they're insisting immediately that you give them money, it should probably be a red flag, right? Because,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
For all of our criticisms of the Catholic Church, you can go every Sunday for free, right? Like, you don't walk in the door and immediately get handed a bill for $500.
You'll just look like a little bit of a rube when the tiny basket comes around. But nobody's going to chase you out the door. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas, with Scientology, it's explicitly it's a pay-to-win game.
Absolutely.
Scientology is Clash of Clans, the more money you pour into it, the more you're going to get.
Scientology is Clash of Clans and Catholicism is Skyrim.
Yeah, exactly.
They can be heavily modded. Are we getting stupider every episode?
I think so.
Cool.
Sorry, Catholics. We've gone a couple episodes without saying anything shady.
We're just kidding. We're joking.
Anyway, if for some reason you made it all the way through this and you want to know a little bit more, you want to stay posted, you want to stay with us as we're making posts, you can follow us on Instagram. We're Historica Esoterica. On Twitter, we are at Hist Esoteric. We do have a TikTok, which I might post on if I am okay with my face being associated with these subjects. Still working on that one.
What we need to do is get those VTuber anime avatars for each other.
Okay, yeah, I like that. So get in touch with us on Instagram or Twitter if you want us to become VTubers. We will.
If you can make us hot little anime boys also, if you're an animator.
Yeah, anything for our listeners, let me tell you. But
oh boy.
Anyway, we've got all of that. We've got some exciting things in the works right now.
That'll actually be maybe informative.
Yeah, I'm willing to say it because I'm very close to being done with it. Our MK Ultra series, which will be sort of a off again, on again kind of thing. We'll sort of do an episode or two and then switch back to regular programming. That will be coming very shortly.
Sweet.
It'll be a much more focused look at these sorts of things rather than a general swath. So, we're going to take a little bit more time to iron out the kinks because it will be serious and educational for once.
And comprehensive,
But I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you are too, everybody, now that I've told you about it.
Definitely.
So, we will see you all next time. Bye. And remember, it's all connected.
I'll go no more roving with you, fair maid. A roving, since roving's been my rule, I can. I'll go no more roving with you, fair maid. Her eyes are blue, her cheeks are red, Mark well what I do say. Her eyes are blue, her cheeks are red, the wealth of her is on her head.